Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Fantasy Nuts UK. And I am delighted today to be joined by one of the, what do you want to call it? One of the Nuts group chat members, maybe? Sam, What is going on, mate? You all right?
Yeah, all good. Yeah, I'm absolutely knackered, but I'm powering through. I'm slowly recovering from the weekend's debacle that is the Rams, but we'll forget about them.
Oh, mate, yeah. I feel you from this weekend. It goes from an extreme high as a Vikings fan to the lowest of the lows within, 7 days.
Yeah.
But Sam, as he just said, he is a Rams fan. On Twitter, at SamRam47, you can see it on his check mark there. He's commissioner of numerous quirky leagues this season. First time doing it, Vampire Leagues, Pirate Leagues, Devi, Franchise Frenzy. Give him a follow because next season, no doubt, there'll be more. It's a nice little twist on fantasy football. All a bit of fun. The league chats are full of banter and that, isn't they? And it's really good.
Yeah, it's just to kind of give a bit of a differential on, the normal PPR leagues and the normal leagues that you see. Just gives a little bit of a free interest for other people that want to try different things, really.
Exactly, yeah. And they're not too, for want of a better word, hard. They're not too, they don't take too much out of you. They're just fun, aren't they? That's what they're supposed to be. They're free leagues. And you can have a laugh with everybody in there as well. And they are really good.
Yeah.
But last week, I was joined by Evan Brown, the host of the Dynasty Debates podcast. Check it out. He is one of the brightest players in the UK fantasy football scene. Give him a follow on Twitter because he's hilarious as well. Loves the GIF at FF Evolution. And Sam, you also feature on a podcast yourself, don't you? Tell everybody a little bit about that.
Yeah, so we run a sort of a regular weekly podcast called Football from Across the Pond. It's just a nice little sort of chat that's sort of been arranged through a regular podcast company, just to kind of get the views of us as UK fans, really. And I think especially with sort of the development of now, you've obviously the German introduction and all that. It's just to kind of get a feel as to what we're feeling and how we sort of view things, and just that little extra bit of fun. So yeah, I mean, we usually sort of post it on a Tuesday, sometimes a Wednesday. So yeah, usually I'll have shared it. So just again, check out my Twitter for it.
Yeah, absolutely. Give Sam a follow on Twitter anyway. But tonight, we're going to go down a different route from usual. We're getting to the money end of the season. We are approaching the fantasy football playoffs. So the usual segments are out the window. We're going to do a little review and find some key takeaways and dig into some stats from week 11 and what we think of players going forward for the rest of the season. And we'll have a little look ahead to the 3 games on the Thanksgiving slate this Thursday. You'll be able to catch the review of those with me, Robin Pitsy, on 5 Yard Rush Fast Action Friday around 6 o'clock this week. And a look ahead to the other games over the weekend, again on Friday. But let's start off the Week 11 review. And I'll kick it off with one from Thursday night. And it's a nice one. The Treylon Burks breakout. A lot of people have been waiting for it. Obviously, he hit the IR. It's his second game back from injury. Only played 50-ish% of the snaps again, which is to be expected, obviously, coming back from injury. Ryan Tannehill has been slinging it, and he's been slinging it well since returning from his short absence also. Burks had a 29.6% target share. He ran 20 routes and was targeted 8 times. That's 40%. Of the routes he ran, he was getting the ball thrown his way. 111 yards on 7 catches. I'm expecting more of these weeks going forward. I don't know if you was in or out on the Burks hype preseason, Sam, but
I was unsure as to what to make of Burks. I mean, obviously he'd had a great sort of college hype, I suppose, is probably what you would call it. And I mean, going from a fantasy perspective, I had very, very, very few picks this year in sort of picking up in a lot of my dynasty leagues. So yeah, I I think if I'd have had the ability to get him, I probably would have got him. But I was hyping in other places. Olave was my biggest hype. But yeah, I mean, he's shown that. I think he's shown exactly what I think everyone expected of him when AJ Brown left. I think, which is, from a fantasy perspective going forward, I think he's going to be a big hit.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the Titans, they needed that pass catcher. Robert Woods has been underwhelming. And then obviously you had Malik come in, and then the Titans just ran the ball every play, which you would do with Derrick Henry if you don't have a quarterback you trust, I suppose. But let's talk about people that run the ball. And Zeke returned for the Cowboys in a 40-3 win against my Minnesota Vikings. As you can tell, no Minnesota club are on show tonight at all. I'm not quite Kyle Brandt. I am still talking to him. But there we go. He found the end zone twice, fell over the line. A very shared load with Pollard still. Zeke getting the short gains and the goal line pushes. Pollard, obviously, the more explosive one. Long receptions, 2 touchdown catches. Nearly double Zeke's rushing yards on the same touches. But he had 109 receiving yards as well. 6 from 6. Zeke only played 29% of the snaps on his return. Tony Pollard, 54%. And Pollard was the RB1 in PPR with 36.9. Now, I was all in on Zeke this preseason, but Pollard has surprised me personally, especially carrying the full workload the 2 weeks previously when Zeke was out. 2 top 10 finishes. I'm expecting similar splits going forward. Pollard to be obviously the more explosive back and use more in the receiving game. It worked very well on Sunday.
Yeah, I mean, I know we've obviously had this chat before about Zeke, and I've been burnt twice on him. I mean, it's harsh to say burnt because at the end of the day, he was still scoring 200 plus points each year in sort of 2018 and 19. But when you're expecting those 300 plus points, it is disappointing, and the injuries and that came with it. I mean, in terms of sort of, I suppose, going forward, I mean, especially sort of next week. I mean, we'll come on to sort of next week a bit later with them being in the other games. But I think, yeah, does Zeke need a fresh start? I think, at the moment, it seems like Pollard is going to be the almost. I mean, he's coming across as he's going to be the number one. So, does Zeke need that fresh start to get those 300 points, that level back again?
So the way I see it is Pollard, he's going to be touchdown dependent really the rest of this season. And it's nothing different to what we've seen before. So, but the only difference is he will be used slightly more. So Zeke's snaps will rise again automatically. He ain't going to be playing 29% of the snaps every week. He will be around the 50-odd mark. But Pollard, who used to play around that 30-odd, will probably be up there with Zeke. So I'd expect the Cowboys to be a little bit more run heavy and Pollard in the receiving game to get a lot. Because obviously we know Zeke, he gets the short gains, he falls over the goal line, he does the dirty work, don't he? He's willing to run for a brick wall. Do Dallas pay Tony Pollard like they did Zeke? Maybe. Does Zeke move on? Also, maybe. Like, I'm not so sure that a fresh start at this point in his career is going to work any wonders. We've seen Melvin Gordon get waived. We've seen Henderson get waived this week alone. Obviously he's way better than them, but
I mean, do they go down the route of similars to what, with Jamal Williams, that Zeke becomes the touchdown king and Pollard's the workhorse, and they just work it as that? That could be the way they do it. I mean, keeps Zeke happy, doesn't it? Keeps getting them touchdowns and.
Yeah, exactly. And it will be a nightmare. That you see a lot more backfields this year. It's a lot more volatile with the fact that there's 2 runners and you don't know who's going to be the one getting the goal line work, and you don't know, you can't predict it week on week. So you obviously have Williams with Swift. Swift's been banged up or whatever. Williams has carried a full workload fine. Zeke's been banged up. Pollard's carried it fine. But then whenever they're both there, they're both getting not enough to make you think RB1, but you do not know because they will push the ball over the line, and 6 points is massive, isn't it, for fantasy football? It's almost like the Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt thing. Chubb was never going to be an RB1 in fantasy football. The RB1, sorry, because of Hunt. And it's an interesting one. Talking about another loaded backfield. Well, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, before we came on air, he's now on IR. But I want to talk about Isaiah Pacheco, however you want to say it. He had 100-plus yards on the ground this week. He had 82 in week 10 against the Jags. He had the favourable matchup against the Chargers. They was allowing the fifth most fantasy points, 25.9 to the running back position. But he's the team's leading rusher now. So obviously mentioned CEH gone to IR. He was banged up. He left week 11 early. Pacheco led the team. McKinnon's still more snaps, but the reason being he's the guy on the field for the passing downs. We know Kansas City with Patrick Mahomes. They're pass-first, high-powered offense. But if Pacheco is running the ball 15 to 20 times a week here on out with 5.1 yards per carry, he will score some weeks. As an RB2 if necessary, if not a flex play weekly, I don't mind it at all.
Yeah, especially in those sort of those big games where you've got, they're playing, like the Bills, you expect that if they can get in front, they're going to run that ball and he's going to pick up yards. Maybe not the Bills as a bad example, but those better teams where they need to then just control the game, and that's where you'll probably see he will come into his own and he'll be pushing those yards.
Yeah, and I think week 11 was a prime example. So he ain't scored since week 1. He's still a rookie, still finding his feet in a way, and he will nick a couple of touchdowns here and there the rest of the way. It's one to keep an eye out for. I mean, until we see different, I'd definitely be starting him myself. Let's move away from running backs for a sec anyway. We all know Dallas Goedert, he got injured. He's on the IR, possibly for the year. I'm not 100% sure. Do you know?
I think it's touch and go. It's going to be at least I think potentially he might come back for the playoffs. So that pretty much rules him out in terms of from a fantasy perspective.
Yeah. So anyway, Goedert, he's leaving behind 20.5% target share. So that's a lot of vacated targets in the Eagles offense. Devonta Smith, now he only had 6 catches for 78 yards this week, but he had a mind-blowing 39.1% target share in week 11 versus Indianapolis. That's up nearly 15% from his season average target share. AJ Brown might not have been full speed. We heard their offensive coordinator talk a little. He done a little video or press conference or something, and he said AJ at 90% is still pretty darn good. Yes, he is. He played 88% of the snaps. So whether he was 100% healthy or not, we don't know. But he had a slight bump over 30%. He's usually just below that for the season. 28.9 target share for the season. It seems Devonta Smith will be the biggest beneficiary of Dallas Goedert going down.
Yeah, I think he is. I mean, I said at the start of the year that he was one of my, I suppose, later picks over sort of in the later rounds in terms of the top. I suppose you're talking top 10 rounds, maybe sort of around that sort of area. And I think that the move that bringing in AJ Brown really sort of helps him as an outlet. It makes him more attractive. I mean, looking at his stats from last year, I mean, he was averaging around 10.85 points per game. And this year he's already at 12.29. So it's not a great increase, but for someone who's gone from essentially being that wide receiver 1 in 2021 to now a wide receiver 2 in 2022, I just think that he's someone you've got to be looking at. And I think especially with their games coming up, maybe he's someone that you need to be almost as a possible permanent flex position in having it. Just, he'll tick over the points and he'll probably score 12, 13 points. It's a good sort of nice score to have.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more. Like getting that consensus number 1 target on the team for Jalen Hurts has helped Smith rather than hinder him. So it's almost the same with like Juju Smith-Schuster. When he was with Antonio Brown in Pittsburgh, he was a wide receiver 1. I'm not comparing him to Juju in any way, shape, or form, but the potential's kind of there. Now Juju's with Kelsey. He was putting in wide receiver 1 weeks again. And it's almost like Devonta Smith needed that.
Yeah.
But let's jump back to running backs because we all love them and they've been horrible this season for us. But this ain't just looking at the rest of this season. This is looking at the future, maybe next year, maybe the year after, who knows. Ramondre Stevenson. Now, I've written here, he's a PPR god in waiting. So PPR god, we're looking at Austin Eckler, someone who legitimately could get 1,000 receiving yards and 1,000 rushing yards, and it wouldn't surprise me at all. On the Patriots offense, he is only behind Jacoby Myers in a target share. So 17.6 for the season, over 20% the last 4 games. Harris was back this week as well. Ramondre was still the lead back. 15 to 8 carries, 35 to 14 snaps, 6 to 2 targets, and they was both 100% on receptions. Harris used as a change of pace, and it worked really well for Harris. 14.2 points in PPR for Ramondre. Them 6 catches. He didn't have a very good week, especially on the ground for him. You add a touchdown to that. That's 20 points. You know, he's in the RB1 conversation there.
Yeah, I mean, he's the sort of player that you think, especially with that, that injury to Harris, and then that, that it, almost like his ability to have that breakout now, that we can trust you, we can move towards you. And I think, if you're looking at, if you've got sort of, again, in most leagues, you've got 2 RBs as your starting lineup, he has to be there. And I think if you are stacked at RB, which some people are, then maybe not. But I think next year, if you're looking at drafting, someone who's going to be in that, I suppose, second group of RBs that go, I mean, he's got to be almost top of that list, you'd like to think, or near there.
Yeah, without a shadow of a doubt, especially in PPR leagues. I mean, next season, I can see it being almost a lot more people leaning to either hero or zero RB, especially in 1QB leagues. With the way the climate's turned, like Murph wrote an article about it, about how it's changed from sort of 2018-19 when you was on about Zeke. And it's completely flipped from when I started playing 3 years ago. Everything was RB, RB, RB. Charlie, our mate Charlie. He almost refused to take anyone other than a running back until he got to round 4 at one point. Like, it's crazy.
Yeah, the idea of having that zero RB is starting to look a bit more tempting now, especially if you can pick up someone like, like a Stevenson. I mean, if you can pick up someone like that in the, in the 3rd round or 4th round, he's still going to be putting up potential RB1 points.
Yeah, I mean, he, like you said with Devonta Smith, Stevenson would have been close to the 10th round, around there, before the season started. And if you've nabbed him, Khalil Herbert, obviously he's an IR now. Players like that, you had an absolute bargain. You've got an RB2 for free, pretty much, But Amari Cooper, now he is a potential league winner for your 2022-23 fantasy season. So he had another 100+ yard game. It's his 4th this year with Jacoby Brissett. 8 catches, 113 yards, 2 touchdowns. 5 weeks of double figures targets have equaled a touchdown for Amari Cooper. Plus week 8 against Cincinnati, 5 of 7 for 131 yards and a touchdown. So he was the wide receiver 2 this week in PPR, over 30 points. He gets Deshaun Watson back in week 13. He is 1 week removed, or 1 game removed, from having Deshaun Watson, one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL, throwing him the ball. It should help eliminate those lesser games where there's no volume or poor yardage. And for the fantasy football playoffs, his schedule is something different. Now, I've been trying this week before this came out, just in case anybody decides to watch it, because his playoff schedule is Baltimore. They allow the 7th most points to wide receivers, 29.8 in week 15. So that's the first round of your playoffs. Second round, New Orleans. They're currently allowing the 14th most, but it's only just about 2 points lower than Baltimore. That will be your semi-final kind of. And then Washington the last week. They're, again, just over a point lower than Baltimore, 28.6 in 10th. Cooper was drafted where? 4th round, 5th round, maybe?
I think, yeah, he was. I think potentially even low when people saw the Deshaun issues. I think people were like, started getting a bit going off him a bit. I mean, it's for anyone who got him later than I would say the 6th round has got an absolute steal at this point, going into those sort of final, like going into like playoff games. I mean, even if you manage to draft him for to trade him for a 1st round pick, you're potentially winning your league if you've done that.
Absolutely. If you're in win now in Dynasty, because he's not overall, I think he's about 27, 28, is he? So he's potentially got 5 years still as well. But if you're win now and you think, I'm going to be a back end 1st round pick anyway, give it away. Go and get Amari Cooper. He could win you your Dynasty League this year. Redraft, that's if your trade deadline hasn't gone. You might not have one. Redraft, obviously, some leagues don't have a trade deadline at all. What would you be packaging up to try and get Amari Cooper now? It's a hard one, isn't it?
I mean, based on those points that they potentially could score, I mean, you're arguably putting him up there with some of the traditional wide receiver ones. You know, do you look at packaging away and like we've said about running backs? Do you package away a couple of running backs for him, and maybe get rid of I'm trying to think. I mean, someone like maybe AJ. And it's a weird one to say, but someone like AJ Brown. I mean, is he worth giving up with the potential that week 16, 17 they're going to be potentially already in the playoffs? Is he going to start reducing his load?
If you've got AJ Brown and you want Amari Cooper, who's got that cushy playoff schedule, you could probably get more than just Amari Cooper by sending AJ Brown. You could. Yeah. Even if you want to get rid of a running back, Najee Harris, if you got him, go and get Amari Cooper. There's someone better than Najee Harris, even though he's had a couple of all right weeks because the volume's been back. But another one in Cleveland as well, Donovan Peoples-Jones. He has been very under the radar this season. 3 out of his 10 games, he was below 10 points only. Only 3. 2 games only under 50 yards. He had his first touchdown of the year in week 11. He also gets Deshaun Watson in week 13. Like, they're doing this with a league backup.
And I mean, he could seriously, I mean, although you don't want to say that he could potentially take away from Cooper, he could potentially be that, almost a bit of a vulture in terms of those getting those sort of touchdowns away from Amari Cooper, and Amari Cooper does the long yards. I mean, it's in terms of the Browns team just look dangerous. I think add in a better they have who's their tight end? Is it still Njoku?
David Njoku, just back from injury this week as well.
And he's a tight end 8, I think, in PPR or around that point. So I mean, Browns are looking dangerous, and I think they could be if you've nabbed some of those players in later rounds, they're the ones you want to be starting.
And he's missed a couple of weeks in Njoku, and he's still in the top 10 of tight ends. Obviously, it's a bit of a crapshoot with tight end, but it's a viable option, isn't it? And the only thing with the Browns is they're 3-7 on the year. If they don't win kind of like their next couple of games on the bounce or 2-3 games, they could be out of playoff contention because you've obviously got the Ravens there, the Bengals, both winning more than they've lost. We'll get onto someone from the Ravens in a minute, but it's a funny one is with where their season goes. Do they keep Brissett in if they're not going to be making the playoffs? We don't know.
It'll be an interesting
and that is that is the risk we're banking with this one, kind of on. We're not saying put all your eggs in one basket and go and get Amari Cooper just in case they don't decide to start Deshaun Watson the rest of this year. But another wide receiver that's absolutely lighting it up, Terry McLaurin for the Washington Commanders. They've won 5 out of their last 6. Taylor Heineke as the quarterback, and he is the quarterback going forward. It's been said by Ron Rivera. He's got them rolling, Heineke has, and Terry McLaurin has kind of leveled out a very nice target share of over 22%, but it was as low as 16% with Carson Wentz under center. He's 5th in the whole league for air yards with 1,100. That's out of running backs, wide receivers, tight ends. Currently up to the wide receiver 13 in PPR on the season, with only scoring 2 touchdowns. So he was a bit of a mixed bag this week. Great first half, 4 for 55. He failed to record a catch in the second half. But Houston are a solid pass defense, 6th in fantasy points allowed per game. What do you see with McLaurin the rest of the year?
I'm always a bit confused with Terry. He feels like he should be so much better than he is in terms of his output. I mean, looking at that, the fact that he's 5th in the league for air yards, you feel he should be better than a wide receiver 13. And when I was having a look at, that the other wide receivers in the Washington core, I mean, Curtis Samuel's 20th overall. I don't know if, again, that was more because Wentz had a very good relationship with him and he's now starting to come down. I mean, Dotson's been injured, but again, between those two, they've got 7 touchdowns and Terry only has 2. So is it a case of, like we've said with a couple of other players we've mentioned so far, is Terry the workhorse and Samuel and Dotson are the vultures for touchdowns? I'm unsure with Terry. Like you say, the fact that he's wide receiver 13, is he now that low value wide receiver 1, high value wide receiver 2? Like I say, doing the hard yardage. It depends. It really does depend. If Heineke wants to use, keep those percentages up in terms of targets, then maybe he is moving up and he'll keep continuing to improve his points. But yeah, he is in that awkward bracket at the moment.
Yeah, so Terry McLaurin has never finished higher than a wide receiver 2. He's currently still a wide receiver 2, being the wide receiver 13, but he's knocking on the door of getting into that wide receiver 1 range where loads of people year in year tout him to be finishing as a top 12 wide receiver. He is now receiving the sort of volume that I expected some other players to get that haven't. And I can't see how with that amount of volume, he's not going to finish because he's got decent hands and Curtis Samuel brings a different aspect to the offense. But Logan Thomas returning, if Dotson comes back in, he's had a few touchdowns and things like that, it's a tricky one. But Heineke does seem to trust Terry the most out of that sort of group.
Yeah, I mean, he like I say, he could. Maybe this is the year that he needs to prove that he can step over that line. I think otherwise, there's going to be always that question mark of can he be the wide receiver 1?
Absolutely, but with the good, there's some good points there for some good players going forward for the rest of this year. With the good, always comes some bad. So we was both high on Zeke. Let's dig into another one that we was both high on, and we've both been burnt. Absolutely, he's back on my bench again. DJ Moore. To simply put it, I was wrong. You was wrong. Gibbo was wrong. I thought Baker was going to be so good for DJ Moore, and he's not. With Baker, he's averaging 3 catches, 37 yards a game. Without Baker, double it, startable. Not now. He's on my bench.
Yeah, I mean it is disappointing. DJ Moore has so much potential. He has so much. With a decent quarterback, he's going to be a wide receiver 1. again, that sort of Terry position, potentially even higher. But you know, I think he's already had, you know, 2 different quarterbacks this year. There's talk that, I mean, I think I've read somewhere that potentially Sam Darnold might even be starting this week because he's back. So, you know, you're looking at a third QB. That's not going to help anyone's output. It's, you know, I mean, I've put on here, I'd start slating over him at this point, and that's, you know, when you think about it, it's not maybe something that you would ever think.
Oh no, without a shadow of a doubt, I'm starting slating over him. Maybe not this week though, but we'll get into that in a minute. But if Sam Darnold is starting this week, that's different for DJ Moore. So I thought Baker Mayfield was the upgrade, right? And he was going to bring him out, the best quarterback he's ever had. And he really isn't. He has been absolute garbage. He might still be the best quarterback he's had, but he is not utilizing DJ Moore at all. He played for 4 different quarterbacks, or with 4 different quarterbacks last year, and he was still knocking on the door to be a wide receiver 1. Now, I thought, you know, Baker will come in, he'll cement the job, he'll do the job. DJ Moore will be a wide receiver 1. You could have got him in the 3rd or 4th round. Lovely. Wasn't the case at all. Another guy who has severely let me down, personally. No, not personally, I'm only joking. But Deontay Johnson. So in the games before the bye weeks, so week 1 to 8 for the Steelers, he had a 26.5% target share. He could scrape by on volume alone, like what we were saying with Terry McLaurin. If he's got that volume, he could be a wide receiver 1. Since coming off the bye week, his target share has bottomed out at 15.6% over the last 2 games. So that's level with George Pickens. His targets per route run is less than Pickens. Big Pat, who I know you were super high on, 29.7% target share over the last 2 games. That's a tight end 1 the rest of the season. Johnson's ADOT, so his average depth of target, is also dropped below 10%. So it's not great in any column if this is his usage going forward, because he's the 3rd option on his team. And since the bye week, Kenny Pickett has also been doing okay, utilizing more with Big Pat and George Pickens than Deontay. So he's had 19 and 16 points for us. No interceptions, which is great going forward. What's going on with Deontay Johnson?
I think he's suffering from what I like to call rookie syndrome. Rookies, especially new, you know, rookies coming into a team. Obviously, Kenny Pickett wasn't in straight away. They love when they're learning the NFL. You can just tell they love to use a tight end outlet, and that's why I was big on Pat, because I thought Kenny Pickett's going to be in. I mean, I genuinely thought he was going to start, but he didn't, and I thought Pat's going to be taking over the majority of those, and that's why I was big on him. And I think that now we're seeing that for Deontay Johnson in terms of this year, it is going to be probably for the rest of this season. He may be just a case of benching him for the rest of the season. And I think, I'm not saying that this is going to affect him long term. I think, you know, once Kenny gets going in the league and starts picking up those, you know, once he starts getting those 19, 16 points, 20 points, once he can start doing that, that's when the relationship with Deontay Johnson will come in. Pickens will probably, I mean, I don't think he'll necessarily be, I mean, he may be the wide receiver 1 in terms of target share, but he may not be. It's going to be an interesting one. I think I do feel for everyone that did go sort of fairly big on Johnson.
Yeah, so him and DJ Moore was drafted at a similar point, and I was getting one or the other pretty much at one point. And then obviously Chris Godwin looked like he could get healthy by week 1, and then I've been them and Chris Godwin was coming to me, you know, unless you was drafted him really early. But it's a funny one, being burnt, but you haven't used too much draft capital on them. And like you say, with DJ Moore, he could still have weeks. Deontay Johnson, until we see otherwise, yeah, he definitely could be benchable. But Give us one guy that you want to talk about, mate.
Yeah, I was having to think about someone who'd had a pretty rubbish week, and I think in terms of, and this is a player who arguably could be up there as potential offensive rookie player of the year, and that's Damian Pierce. I mean, I think if we just go over sort of his points and over the last few weeks. I mean, weeks 3 to 10, he was averaging 21 rushes for 96 yards, so looking at around a 16-point average. Against against Washington last week, he had 10 rushing attempts for only 8 yards, which, when you look at the rest of his stats, that was a massive drop. I know Washington, I think, going off last week, going up, I think the last 3 weeks, they were one of the top 3 defenses against the rush. And this is where I think that, you're looking at someone like Damian Pierce for the next week. I mean, they've got Miami, 6th best rushing defense at home. He's a risky starter. I mean, I like Damian Pierce. I think he's had a great rookie season, but is he fizzling out a bit? Is he sort of hit his, this is it for his sort of, I suppose, fantasy season?
So with Damian Pierce, let's talk a little bit about the NFL draft, right? Because running backs drafted after a certain round, I don't have it written down in front of me. I wish I did. They don't tend to hold starting jobs in the NFL, right? He's one of them. Now, people were super high on Pierce, especially from our group, Ryan, Gibbo. I was there. It's kind of, back end of the first. If I've got a late pick, okay, I'll pull the trigger on Pierce. Like, we'll try it. But for longevity in dynasty leagues, maybe not so. I would not be surprised if Houston, if they've got a first round pick, like I say, I've not looked into it, go and get a running back in the first round, because there are some talented boys coming out of college this year. And that would just ruin him, wouldn't it? Well, there's 2 talented running backs on waivers right now. Who says Houston don't go and get one of them? They picked up Marlon Mack.
Yeah, it could be a. That's what I'm saying. Is that it's like you say, with Darrell Henderson and Melvin Gordon. I mean, Houston could look to one of those 2 to think, right, we'll bring them in to either take over or support Damian Pierce. I mean, at the moment, he's got Rex Burkhead, and that was less said about him, the better. I think, if you're looking at Damian Pierce at the moment, like you say, long term, depending on how his situation works, he may be one to keep. But for the rest of this season, I mean, I'm struggling to see how he can add value now. I mean, yes, okay, he's the lead in rush, but you've got to be. I think he's very risky as a starter unless you need to play him.
Yeah, like as possibly as a flex play or RB2 maybe, because of how bad the running back scene has gone. But let's move forward now. Russell Wilson, where to start with him? So if you got him in a 1 QB league, drop him. That is my advice right now to everybody. Just drop him. His completion percentage is below 60%. He ranks 31st out of 34 quarterbacks that have played over 300 snaps. So basically your starters, and then you got like Cooper Rush and, players like that in there. Below 60%, 31st out of 34 qualifying quarterbacks. Passing yards, better, but not great. 16th out of 34. Passing touchdowns, he's only had 7. He's 28th out of 34. Now, this is a different one. So the Denver O-line, this could be more on them, but his completion percentage when pressured, he ranks 27th out of 34 with only a 44.4% completion percentage when he's under pressure. He has to be droppable in 1 QB leagues. I don't know how you see it. If that schedule is so super soft that he could be startable going forward, but I'm done. Ross ain't
Yeah,
cooking for me no more.
I fell foul of the Russ hype, thinking he's leaving Seattle and this is it. I picked him up in a lot of leagues. I picked him up in the Warrior Bowl, and it's been so difficult for me in that league because at the moment I have Lawrence, Russell, Russ, and David Mills who's now being dropped. So that I'm just in such a bad position with them, and I just think, yeah, it was one of those where I think again the hype got the better of me, and yeah, I think I would probably agree. 1 QB leagues, he would be sat on my bench, and he would never play. I'd have, whoever my other QB was.
So at this point in the season as well, in 1 QB leagues, like unless your quarterback is coming up to a bye, he's got a week 13 or 14 bye, you don't need to. Go and get Odell Beckham off waivers. Go and get someone that could be a good play for 1 week off waivers. Like, you don't need 2 quarterbacks. You don't need 2 tight ends if you only have to start one by this point in the season. They're just going to clog a spot. If you have to drop Russell Wilson, I'm assuming you've already got someone else, maybe Geno Smith, Marcus Mariota, someone like that. But yeah, that's where I see it with Russ. Another quarterback started the season lights out, Lamar Jackson. So I'm not saying he's droppable. Do not get this twisted. He is still the QB6 on the year. Weeks 2 and 3, over 40 fantasy points for us. We obviously know he's fantastic on the ground. Possibly not the best in the league no more. Now, Mr. Fields has started running the field a little bit, but 6 of his 10 weeks, he's been in the top 12, mostly the low end. Week 2 and 3 was obviously the QB1, but with Andrews missing time, Bateman out for the year, Dobbins banged up again, Gus banged up again. I'm not sitting him yet. It's Lamar Jackson, you know what I mean? But it's one to keep an eye on as the weeks go on, heading towards the playoffs.
Yeah, I think. Obviously, Gus is, from what I hear, due back. But I think they were talking about. I think when it was during the match that they played against at the weekend, and his yards in terms of rushing yards, he's down by he's less than 50% on what he was last year, but he then isn't. It baffles me where he's gone, because he's, like you say, he's lost Bateman. Devin Duvernay, I suppose, sort of being his outlet, but not. And obviously, Andrews has been injured, so I'm struggling to see, unless these, so at least some of these, Andrews obviously staying fit will help him out. But yeah, he's definitely not droppable. I think if you've got if you've got someone like a Fields, or you've managed to wangle another good running back quarterback to go alongside Lamar Jackson, then maybe. But yeah, I don't think he's droppable just yet.
Talking of Lamar as a running back, it's been the running, pardon the pun, it's been the running joke in our group chat for the last 3 years. Connor, being a Ravens fan who was on the show himself, and he hates it, doesn't he? Proper bias, but it's brilliant. It's a strange one with Lamar, because obviously he only played 12 games in total last season, and he had about 800 yards on the ground. He's had over 600 this year so far in 10 games. So he ain't too far off the pace. Maybe the year before, I can't remember how many he had, but I imagine it will be close on 1,500 maybe, or over 1,000 definitely. But I want Lamar from week 2 and 3, because I was heavily invested this year. And for the playoffs, we need him back. We need you, Lamar. We need you. Last one, before we have a look at the Thanksgiving slate, Kyle Pitts, obviously devastatingly out for the season with an MCL tear from week 11. Injuries are never nice, especially for young studs like himself. But this year, it may look like, he's been a flop, which he has been a flop before the injury. Was it his fault? That's what I want to look at. So his snap share, targets per route were on A dot. All of that is good from the outlook. You know, it's high numbers. For me, there's two reasons. Number one, the play calling. Atlanta call a run play the second most in the league. They're averaging only 22.8 passes per game. Pitts is over a quarter of the targets. So it's still under 6 per game on average, though. The other thing is quarterback play. Mariota is not the answer going forward for the Falcons. They know that, but they're winning games in a weak division. He's been great for us in fantasy football if you manage to nab him off your waiver wire, but his pass catchers have barely been startable for the most part in fantasy football this year. So this is an interesting stat here, and it made so much sense to me. Only 57% of Kyle Pitts' 58 targets were deemed catchable. I believe that's from RotoViz. Someone sent it to me. So that's 33, right? 33 of his 58 targets were deemed catchable. He caught 28 of them. Now, when it looks like 48.3% of his 58 passes is what he caught, 28, that looks bad. When only 5 of the balls that he didn't catch were deemed catchable, that looks good. But it also looks like it's only 3 targets per game or 3 balls he could catch per game. Nobody can get by on that.
Yeah, I mean, I never got the hype around Kyle Pitts from the start. I know a lot of people were hyping him up. I mean, you think even when in his, you know, he was being dubbed. I think he was being taken as taken over the likes of Kittle, and you just think, why? Like, he's not proved. I mean, yes, he was good in college, but he's not proven anything. But like you say, I think that he's fallen foul to a play scheme that is like rush heavy, and a quarterback who spends most of his time rushing as well. And I think maybe looking forward, I mean, obviously they've got Desmond Ridder as the backup. Do they start, thinking, well, we need to, because I mean, Patterson's probably maybe got another year in him, maybe not. So do they need to start thinking we need to actually, scheme this around a quarterback who's going to be here for a while? If they don't think Ridder's that answer, then maybe they need to go out and look at another quarterback and bring in someone who's more capable of throwing the ball than Mariota is.
Yeah, absolutely. I said it before the season because Ridder showed last year in college he could sling it for them Bearcats, and he got them in a position that I don't think they've ever been in. But I said it before the season, Mariota will be benched. Ridder will be the starter by week 6. Now, I never would have imagined Atlanta winning this many games on the whole year. That division is rubbish. Brady might be figuring it out a little bit now, but that division on the whole is absolute rubbish. And I really believe if Atlanta hadn't been winning them games early on, I think they went 4-2, did they? Or 3-3. If they were 0-6, I really believe Ridder would have been in because they know Mariota isn't the guy going forward. They know that.
Yeah.
They spent a lot of...
He was a stopgap until obviously Ridder was ready.
Yeah. Because of Ridder being so raw and things like that. And they spent a lot of draft capital on Drake London, a lot of draft capital on Kyle Pitts. What, to not give them the ball? Yeah, right. Come on. Ridder was meant to be primed for sort of the end of this year, next season. I thought he would get in sooner. Wasn't the case. But Mariota is not the guy going forward. And that's as simple as that. But shall we have a little look at tomorrow evening's and nighttime games quickly? So the first game at 5:30 UK time. So people will be rushing home from work, I'm sure. Maybe not if you're a Lions fan, but the Lions face the Bills. So Josh Allen is 2 weeks removed from his hurting elbow, is it, I think? QB1 performance incoming. Detroit allowed the most fantasy points per game to quarterbacks at 24. But on the other side of the ball, on the other team, Jared Goff, he's going to have to sling it. So it's a massive uptick for Amon-Ra. He ain't Justin Jefferson. He ain't getting 193 yards, but he can torch that Bills secondary. So in receiving touchdowns, they're 9th with 10 allowed. Receiving yards, they're 11th with over 1,600. They've allowed 6 players to go over 100 receiving yards this year. 3 wide receivers over 30 PPR points. 2 of them in the last 2 weeks, Cooper and Jefferson. It's going to be an interesting one. The Lions, they seem to play for Dan Campbell, man, and I don't know. It'll be a good game.
I'm looking forward to watching this game. I think that it'll be high scoring. I think, if I mean, most people have probably been, obviously the Bills being one of the top defenses, I think I'd potentially be pulling them out. And I mean, there is the potential that they could get a lot of interceptions and maybe a couple of pick sixes or a pick six or whatever. But I mean, I'd be half tempted to look at maybe benching the Bills defense because that it could go off on both sides. I mean, you'll know that I'm massive on Gabe Davis. I think there's a few of us. There's me. There's Charlie. Both absolutely mad on Gabe Davis, and I think this week could be a big week for him. He usually has. I think he's, from when I was looking at his scores, I think he's had 3 games over 15 points this year, and usually they've come around games where he's not had a good week. Now, last week wasn't a great week for him, so we could be maybe in for a big week, especially with how poor that Lions defense is.
Yeah, the Lions are bad against every skill position in fantasy football. There's no misconception there anywhere. If you've got Gabe Davis, you're likely going to start him as a bare minimum, like you said, bare minimum as a flex play this week. Well, you wouldn't flex him, you'd put him in as wide receiver because he's the first game of the weekend. Yeah. But as a bare minimum, I think, yeah, you make a good point there with Gabe Davis. 9:30 UK time, Cowboys against the Giants. Now, that Cowboys defense is no joke, man. They're lying. You got Micah Parsons, all of them. They all line up wherever they want, and all of them can put pressure on the quarterback. Danny Dimes and Saquon Barkley will struggle this week. The Cowboys defense are top 5 in fantasy points allowed against quarterbacks and running backs. And watching it firsthand for the full game for the first time this year, they are serious. Now, the Vikings' O-line had more holes than a sieve last week, but Parsons is no joke. You had Lawrence coming off the side. He was no joke. Jaron Kearse getting up from behind them. Brilliant. And I wouldn't be surprised to see a similar sort of scoreline. The only difference maybe, the only potential difference maybe is the Giants. They're good against wide receivers. Very good. It could be a low-scoring game for that reason. I wouldn't be surprised to see it go either way, but they're going to have to stop Zeke and Pollard. So tell us about Zeke and Pollard.
Yeah, I mean, I think we know that the Giants' biggest weakness is their rough defense. I mean, like I think you put on there, they've allowed the 7th most rushing yards, and also allowing the most yards per reception for running backs. That plays into Zeke and Pollard just absolutely just bombing that ball down, just driving it through. I mean, if you are fortunate enough to have had both, and I don't often see or say this in terms of play like those in sort of playing this, but I'd be so tempted to play Zeke and Pollard together as maybe an RB1 and RB2, because I think together you're looking at potential 35-point gain together from both of them. It may be that, Zeke only has 12, 13, but Pollard will pick up the rest. I think when you look at some of the other RBs, that could easily be, 35, 40 points between them, which is what you need from two running backs, really.
Yeah, people that love to grab a running back and then grab their handcuff, this is the week to use both. Similarly to when Miami first got Jeff Wilson and they used him with Mostert. The second game, they was both top 10. I'm sure Zeke and Pollard was both top 12 this week anyway. Well, Pollard was the RB1. I'm sure Zeke would have been top 12. But like you say, 35 points could be a floor. That could be their floor level against the Giants because they are that bad. And if Pollard gets 6 targets again, he's going to catch the ball 6 times against this Giants defense. They are bad against running backs.
Yeah.
But let's move on to the last one. And of course, it is in the middle of the night because I'd have loved to watch it. But the Vikings versus the Patriots, 1:20 Friday morning UK time. It's a big Thursday night football game for Kirk Cousins, needing a bounce back win immediately. Mentioned the O-line earlier, shambolic against Dallas. Patriots are the best against running backs and top 3 against wide receivers in fantasy points allowed. Where do we go against this Patriots defense?
The same place everywhere else has gone, tight end, and you've got a good one. TJ Hawkinson. I mean, I arguably would say this is probably in the back end of in sort of the when we're talking sort of the trade period. I think this could be the trade of the year. I think he's. I mean, that's maybe second to McCaffrey, but you know, I think TJ Hawkinson's an absolute steal of a pick. And like I say, I mean, they're the 13th. Teams target their tight ends against the Patriots, 13th most in the NFL. And Hawkinson was good. I mean, it wasn't a good game for the Vikings, but Hawkinson was good in that game. And I think we could see, another tight end outlet being used. And I think, Hawkinson has he's up there as one of the best for yards gained after being tackled. So you could see some big scores there for him.
I mean, the 3 weeks he's been in Minnesota, he's almost been like Cousins' safety blanket when he can't get it to JJ, where it used to be Thielen. It's now Hawkinson almost automatically. He's caught 75% of targets, so he's caught 21 of 28 in them 3 games. 28 targets in 3 games is a lot. Some wide receiver ones on their teams don't get that. Second most targets over the 3 games by 10. Like Thielen had 18 targets behind him. Cousins has to go that way again on Thursday if he's going to get any success.
Yeah, I think he's going to be very important to get him past that Patriots defense. And I think having someone like Hawkinson, even if you don't necessarily target him as much as maybe that you would expect, having someone like that opens up other options, opens up the rush, opens up the pass, and that's where you'll see potentially the likes of JJ getting a few more points than maybe you would expect because of Hawkinson.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more. He is that safety blanket that Cousins needed. But that is about it, mate. It's been great to have you on. Didn't know what to expect from your accent, being from the Midlands, now living in the North. Now I know we've never actually spoke properly like this, but...
No, it's a bit of a mashup, really.
Yeah, a bit like mine as well. Mine's a Southern to Midlands hybrid. Yours is a Midlands to Northeast hybrid, and we love it, don't we? But I hope this has helped whoever's tuned in, whoever will be tuning in later in the week or whatever, and enjoy this weekend's games. Obviously, if you've got any lineup dramas, don't hesitate to hit me or Sam up on Twitter, to be honest. His Twitter handle is there on the screen now. Mine at Elvins1 as always. But unless you're playing me, good luck this weekend, and we will see you next week.